In November 1965, a small clearing in the jungles of Vietnam became the center of a confrontation no one fully understood yet. What began as a routine operation quickly spiraled into something far bigger, something that would redefine how wars were fought. Deep in hostile terrain, two very different military systems collided for the first time, each confident, each unprepared for what was coming next. It was a test of new technology, new doctrine, and new assumptions about modern combat. The consequences would echo far beyond the battlefield, shaping strategies, decisions, and lives for years to come. Why did commanders on both sides believe this fight would be short, and how did a single encounter expose both the power and the limits of modern warfare? Before we can answer that, we need to go back to the conditions that made this battle inevitable. In early 1965, the strategic situation in South Vietnam was deteriorating rapidly. Most rural areas were under Viet Cong influence, supported by regular units of the People's Army of Vietnam. Roads, villages, and supply routes were contested or controlled by communist forces, limiting government mobility. The Central Highlands, particularly the Pleiku region, became a focal point because it connected coastal areas to Laos and Cambodia. This terrain offered concealment, sanctuary, and access to the Ho Chi Minh Trail. North Vietnamese forces operating there carried experience from the First Indochina War, having previously fought French units in the same mountains and jungles. By early 1965, communist commanders viewed the highlands as a decisive operational zone where large formations could challenge South Vietnamese and newly arrived American forces directly. For the United States, this environment exposed the limitations of the South Vietnamese army. Despite multiple battalions stationed around Plaque, local forces struggled to secure rural territory or respond quickly to enemy movements. Dense jungle, limited roads, and poor intelligence made conventional maneuver slow and predictable. American planners concluded that traditional ground operations would surrender the initiatives to an enemy skilled in ambush and dispersion. To regain freedom of action, U.S. commanders searched for methods that could bypass terrain and logistics constraints. The answer emerged in vertical envelopment, using helicopters to move infantry over obstacles, deliver fire support, and evacuate casualties, redefining how mobility could be achieved in modern warfare. This search crystallized into the doctrine of airmobile warfare. The concept relied on helicopters as the backbone of combat power, enabling rapid insertion, continuous resupply, and emergency extraction under fire. Infantry units would operate without heavy organic weapons, depending instead on remotely coordinated artillery, close air support, and aerial rocket fire. The newly formed 1st Cavalry Division was designated to test this doctrine in real combat conditions. Its mission was not only tactical success, but institutional validation. Ia Drang would become the proving ground, where theory met the realities of enemy resistance, terrain, and sustained combat pressure. Intelligence assessments preceding the battle shaped expectations on both sides. American planners believed enemy presence near the Sikupong Massif was limited, estimating at most a single regiment. In reality, multiple North Vietnamese regiments were concentrated in the area, prepared to fight a determined battle. Vietnamese commanders anticipated technological superiority, but understood its vulnerabilities. They expected helicopters, artillery, and air power to dominate open engagements, yet prepared tactics emphasizing close combat to neutralize fire support. As both forces moved toward Ia Drang, expectations diverged sharply regarding duration, intensity, and cost. These miscalculations ensured that when contact occurred, the battle would exceed planning assumptions and forced rapid adaptation from every level of command. Together, these conditions made confrontation unavoidable. Geography, doctrine, intelligence, and opposing strategies converged in the Central Highlands. Ia Drang was not accidental, but the product of deliberate choices by both commands. When the first helicopters descended, the stage was set for a battle that would redefine war and modern military history forever globally. The Battle of Ia Drang marked the first sustained clash between regular United States forces and the People's Army of Vietnam. During the Vietnam War, conceived as a reconnaissance in force, the operation rapidly escalated into a multi-day engagement that tested new doctrines under extreme pressure. For American planners, Ia Drang was intended to validate airmobile warfare in real combat. For North Vietnamese commanders, it was an opportunity to confront a technologically superior enemy directly. From the outset, the battle demonstrated that the conflict had entered a new phase, one defined by modern warfare, mobility, and large-scale engagement. The operation focused on Landing Zone X-ray, a small clearing near the Sekupang Massif, chosen after aerial reconnaissance. Its limited dimensions forced American forces to deploy in, leaving earlier rivals exposed while helicopters returned for subsequent lifts. Soon after landing, patrols encountered North Vietnamese units operating close to the clearing. Contact escalated quickly, forcing Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore to establish a defensive perimeter. With enemy forces pressing from multiple directions, time became critical. Survival depended on holding ground until reinforcements could arrive, highlighting the risks inherent in vertical envelopment operations. Helicopters became the decisive element sustaining American forces at X-ray. A 1 Huey aircraft conducted continuous flights, delivering ammunition, water, and reinforcements, while evacuating wounded soldiers under intense fire. Nearly every helicopter sustained damage, yet most remained operational. This constant aerial flow preserved combat power and morale, allowing the battalion to resist. Ia Drang demonstrated that helicopter warfare was no longer auxiliary but essential to battlefield survival. The ability to insert, supply, and extract troops by air fundamentally reshaped military aviation history and modern warfare doctrine. As fighting intensified, coordination between infantry, artillery, and aviation became increasingly complex. Forward observers relied on radio communications to direct artillery barrages and close air support. In a historic first, B-52 bombers were authorized for tactical strikes near friendly forces. Dense vegetation, limited visibility, and the proximity of enemy units created constant danger. Communication breakdowns and the risk of friendly fire tested command judgment. Ia Drang revealed that modern warfare required precise integration of firepower and maneuver, even under chaotic and rapidly changing combat conditions. North Vietnamese commanders quickly adapted to American methods. Observing reliance on helicopters and long-range fire support, they emphasized close combat tactics. By engaging at extremely short distances, they reduced the effectiveness of artillery and airstrikes. This approach forced brutal, man-to-man fighting and increased American vulnerability. Rather than seeking immediate victory, North Vietnamese forces focused on attrition, and Ia Drang confirmed for them that technological superiority could be countered through proximity, discipline, and willingness to sustain heavy casualties over time. The second phase of Ia Drang occurred at Landing Zone Albany, exposing critical weaknesses in American operations. After leaving X-ray, the 2nd Battalion, 7th Cavalry Regiment advanced on foot through dense jungle. Units became stretched along narrow trails, reducing mutual support and situational awareness. North Vietnamese forces exploited these conditions with a devastating ambush. Mortar fire and close assaults shattered the column. Albany demonstrated that without constant air mobility, American units were highly vulnerable to terrain, surprise, and enemy initiative in jungle warfare. During the Albany ambush, command and control rapidly deteriorated. Leaders were killed or isolated, radius failed, and centralized direction became impossible. Small groups of soldiers fought independently, often unaware of adjacent units. Artillery and air support were difficult to coordinate due to confusion and proximity. Recovery depended on individual initiative and delayed reinforcement. The contrast between X-ray and Albany revealed the dual nature of airmobile warfare. Its effectiveness depended not only on helicopters, but on cohesion, leadership, continuity, and communication under extreme pressure. Ia Drang became a defining case study in mission command. Subordinate leaders were forced to act with incomplete information, exercising initiative within broad intent. Trust between commanders and soldiers allowed units to hold positions, redistribute ammunition, and reorganize under fire. Commanders accepted significant risk while adapting plans to unfolding realities. These experiences highlighted the importance of decentralized leadership in modern warfare. Ia Drang demonstrated that while technology enhanced combat power, leadership, discipline, and human judgment remained decisive factors on the battlefield. At higher command levels, interpretations of Ia Drang diverged sharply. American leaders focused on enemy casualty ratios, viewing the battle as validation of firepower and mobility. These assessments reinforced confidence in escalation and attrition strategies. North Vietnamese leaders reached different conclusions. They believed their forces had endured American technology and survived. To them, this confirmed that prolonged war favored endurance over material superiority. These opposing interpretations ensured continued escalation, shaping the strategic trajectory of the Vietnam War for years to come. Ia Drang was more than a battle. It was a turning point in war history. It defined the central role of helicopters, reshaped command philosophy, and influenced future conflicts worldwide. The engagement exposed both the strengths and limitations of modern warfare. For the United States, it established operational patterns that would dominate the Vietnam War. For North Vietnam, it confirmed the effectiveness of close combat and strategic patience. Decades later, Ia Drang remains a foundational reference in military history, war documentary analysis, and studies of modern warfare. The Battle of Ia Drang marked a decisive turning point in the Vietnam War and in the broader history of modern warfare. For the United States, it confirmed that airmobile warfare could function under extreme combat conditions. Helicopters proved capable of inserting, sustaining, and extracting troops in hostile territory, validating years of doctrinal development. This success reinforced American confidence in mobility, firepower, and technological solutions, shaping operational patterns for the remainder of the war. Ia Drang demonstrated that modern warfare would be increasingly defined by speed, vertical maneuver, and integrated air-ground operations. At the same time, the battle delivered equally important lessons to North Vietnam. Commanders concluded that American technological superiority could be neutralized through tactical adaptation, close combat, rapid engagement, and maintaining contact at minimal distance reduced the effectiveness of artillery and air support. Ia Drang reinforced a strategy based on attrition, patience, and political endurance, rather than decisive battlefield victory. From this perspective, survival itself became success. These conclusions shaped North Vietnamese doctrine for the remainder of the conflict and directly influenced the long war that followed. Strategically, Ia Drang accelerated escalation. American leaders interpreted casualty ratios as evidence that attrition would eventually defeat the enemy. This belief encouraged increased troop deployments and expanded operations across South Vietnam. Conversely, North Vietnamese leaders interpreted the same battle as proof that the war could be sustained indefinitely. These opposing conclusions locked both sides into a prolonged conflict, defined by endurance rather than resolution. Ia Drang thus influenced not only tactics, but the fundamental strategic logic of the Vietnam War. The battle also left a lasting legacy in military doctrine. Concepts tested at Ia Drang became foundational elements of modern armed forces, including decentralized command, reliance on aviation assets, and integration of joint fires. At the same time, Albany revealed the vulnerabilities of these methods when cohesion, intelligence, or mobility failed. Together, X-Ray and Albany formed a complete lesson set, illustrating both the power and limits of modern military systems. Decades later, Ia Drang remains a reference point for understanding the Vietnam War and the evolution of modern warfare. It stands as a moment when two military systems confronted each other directly and learned how the war would truly be fought.